Hey everybody, Ronald Reagan here. It's your boy. Today we're coming at you with some hot news from Hong Kong, but first we're going to do some introductions. Let's start off with Astro Shui. What's up with you?
I'm really down. I'm the shoe.
The shoe.
I am the shoe.
Awesome.
I'm kidding. My real name is Matthew.
Excellent. All right, Liquid Snake. What's up with you, man?
Yes. My name is John, and I don't want to work tomorrow.
And you're Asian, so you know all
Yes,
about
sir.
Hong Kong.
Oh yes, I know everything. It's in my blood.
He also speaks both Mandarin and the other language in China that's spoken that I'm
Cantonese?
suddenly forgetting. Cantonese.
I didn't know you actually...
Exactly.
I didn't know that you spoke both.
He speaks both, yes.
Okay, that is over way too many credentials on me.
He is also a history aficionado.
Oh God.
Anything about history he knows, he is that amazing at it. He has a full degree in it.
Oh,
my
wow.
God.
Walking
So if he's wrong,
yeah, he's the official for this podcast.
Oh God.
All right, who are you, Mr. Sindra man?
I'm Raj. I'm a graduate student. I don't want to read any more papers, but I have to.
You're also Asian light, basically.
I'm Indian.
No,
so...
he's Indian.
Yeah, that's why I said Asian light. You know, kind of like Bud Light, Corona Light. You know, Asian, but like a little offset.
I got you.
A subcontinent. You know.
Yes.
All right, final introduction. What is up, generic? Wait, you're not generic. Yeah, you're generic T-girl.
Yeah, generic. It used to be genetic, but oh no, it's still genetic. It's meant to be generic. Okay, well, I'm May.
You guys can't read.
Username, generic T-girl, and fuck Beijing, and Pepe for Hong Kong.
Pepe forever.
Pepe forever.
All right, who wants to start us off with some hot facts about Hong Kong?
Let's start at the beginning. So someone who knows anything about history, not me.
Matt, hit it up.
About the history.
Rip it up.
Wait, didn't we just establish that Liquid Snake was the history buff?
No, we didn't.
He's a Euro snob.
He's shy.
Okay.
He's very shy.
He's Roma Invicta.
I kind of am.
Hey, we said he was Chinese already. We can't have him talking about Hong Kong.
I have an implicit bias of pro Beijing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Opium.
On that note, opium wars.
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
So, start off. To understand what's going on in Hong Kong, we got to reverse back into the early 19th century. So during that time, the British Empire was sort of like the America of the world today. They were one of the biggest economies in the world. They were heavily dependent upon the importation of tea and other silk and other valuables from China. But Britain had a problem. They could only trade using silver. The Chinese would only accept silver, and they were limited to one specific port because China wanted less foreign influence on their economy. Britain found a workaround though, in that they sold opioids to the Chinese black market in exchange for silver, and then used that silver to buy tea from the Chinese.
I was wondering where the drugs were going to come in.
Yeah. Yeah. Eventually, the Chinese started to crack down on this. They quickly figured out what was going on and told the British, "Hey, stop it."
No bueno.
When British said, "Fuck you. We're just going to keep doing it. We like money." I mean, who doesn't?
I like money.
Yeah. So, they go to war, and China was defeated and forced to cede most of what we now call Hong Kong to Britain.
Pretty much just the island, right?
Yeah, for
the
most.
First one, yeah.
A little fun fact: the guy that secured the deal got demoted because one of the people in England at the time was like, "Wow, this is a useless island with nothing on it, and you Like, we could have asked for a lot more, and you got this crappy little island that's never going to amount to anything.
How did he
So-
come to that deal?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. I guess...
I'm not sure either.
John, is there
Yeah.
anything else you can add to that? Like anything
Oh,
more?
for like how they got the Kowloon Island specifically.
Or just in general.
Well,
just in
like
general, 'cause
one
I
of the
feel like you
biggest
have some
things was
insight.
like the very first conflict that happened was mostly focused on recompensation because the Chinese government actually brought in like this extremely stringent bureaucrat that was known for being incorruptible to just go really hard on cracking down on opium, and like they never actually got that much out of the war, like you guys are bringing up. The thing that really led to the creation of like the autonomous region that we talk about now for Hong Kong was after the second Opium War, where like even more territory was finally ceded over from China. And it's really important to remember that at this time, China was being partitioned by a lot of countries. Like it wasn't only the UK that was using the motivation of drugs to try to like bring themselves into China, like missionary work or like just foreign invasions from like Russia, Japan, France, and other minor countries. Kind of just all hopped into China at that time. So like,
So what I'm
it's-
hearing is that China's not a huge fan of Game of Thrones because they don't like the milk of the poppy.
Oh,
yeah, that's why like you always hear a lot of like interesting stories. Like my dad actually has like really interesting stories from what his grandpa would tell him about. Like he would be like, oh yeah, there was one time China was invaded by 8 countries at one time. Like he always talked about like Western influences in China at the time, which is why like his concept of China is really interesting compared to like how we learn about China. Like, cause he and his grandfather, whenever they talked about it, would always still bring up when China was being attacked or split up by so many countries, and it kind of creates like this semblance of nationalism to the new unified China.
Yeah, I feel like nationalism is a pretty core part, kind of a strangely large core part for a communist country.
Yeah,
Mm.
and then
Which is a problem in Hong Kong. Very big problem in Hong Kong today.
oh yeah, absolutely. Like, but then one of the biggest things to bring up is that the control of Hong Kong even like persisted all the way up to 1997, like that exact same region for around the 99-year lease is what they like did in their treaty for the Chinese.
Yep.
So
yeah.
that
The
brings
reason
us up
they-
to the modern times, at least with the Chinese, and then probably like
So
if anybody else wants to talk about
a
what
question
happened.
that popped up into my mind. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
A question that popped up into my mind as I was learning about this is why did Britain give away, I guess, but like give away all of their region that
I'm
they
not
had controlled?
sure.
Like Margaret Thatcher made this deal, right? Originally, and originally it was just going to be part of the Greater Bay Area, and then they just decided to give away like all of it. Is it just too
I'm not
much work to keep, or what was the motivation for that?
I'm not sure. I mean, if you look back at the original lease that was signed in 1898, it would only give away the so-called new territories. The other two from the First and Second Opium Wars that was given to the British, Hong Kong Island and I believe Kowloon, those, at least in theory, were supposed to be under permanent British rule.
Yeah, that's what I learned as well. So I don't know. I was just curious if anyone knew. From what I understood, it was because a lot of their food supply came from the neighboring islands, and it would have been a lot of work for Britain to supply like food to them. But I don't know. That seemed like a weird reason to me for such like a bustling area. I feel like it would have been worth investment even at the time. But, I don't know.
Another question I have is back in 1898, why didn't the British demand something more permanent than a 99-year lease? Why didn't they basically go after it all over again? A third Opium War.
Yeah, I feel like that would be hard to find out because that's probably, I don't know. There's probably a lot of peace talks that went
Yeah.
into that deal. that we just aren't privy to.
Yeah.
And at this point aren't recorded at all.
Fun fact, the diplomat that negotiated these terms basically called it this 99-year lease, quote, practically forever, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Kind of ironic.
Yeah, 99
All
years
right.
is not that long at all.
No, that's like,
Unless they were expecting the world to end.
to be fair, he probably was like, fuck it. I'm like 50 or something. I'm gonna die within 99 years, and that's the
That's
next
forever for
generation.
me.
Well, it's forever enough for
Well,
me.
And
I'll be dead.
Hong Kong is
Forever
only
for me, not for thee.
Oh, sorry, what was that, man?
Forever for me, not for thee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Hong Kong's was only going to be a SAR for 50 years. Special Administrative Region, SAR. I just say SAR in my head.
So that's what SAR means.
Yep, Special Administrative Region, as in it has that's the one country, two systems deal.
Mhm.
But it's only
All right.
until 2047 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
After that, we don't know exactly.
Yeah, there's no deal that goes past that point.
All right. So we have the history.
Yeah.
What's happening with the protests?
So there's been 2019 protests and 2020 protests, and there were also
And
the 2014 umbrella movement protests, and they're all
Yep.
somewhat unique and somewhat unified. So does anyone want to summarize those? All right. Sorry, we are back. We experienced a little bit of technical difficulties with the internet. So as we were saying, we're going to move on to the modern protests of 2019-2020, and we're going to have Raj and John take the wheel for a bit to give us an overview of that.
Yes, John, the guy who had the technical difficulties.
Yeah,
He was getting his orders from China.
freaking
It was like-
5K ping.
They're like, oh shit, we got to censor this guy real quick.
Yeah, that's exactly why these all happened. It was like, all right, we got to lag him real quick. All right, John, you got to talk about these things. Gotta say this, and don't shame the party.
China wants to know your location.
All right, so brief overview on what happened. April 3rd was when the bill that started this all off really was put into place. It was legislated. And the reason it was is because there was some issues with, I think, Taiwan and like being able to move like someone that commits a crime in Hong Kong but comes from a different nationality and the jurisdiction on how to deal with that.
Yeah, I
There
believe
was
the biggest
some
concern
weird loopholes there.
with the that was the extradition bill, and the biggest loophole with that or the fear with that was that it was going to be a way of circumventing Hong Kong's independent judiciary.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So,
like the concerning part was Hong Kong actually doesn't have, if I remember correctly, doesn't have actually like any extradition bill with Taiwan. And what happened was there was a guy that like killed his girlfriend, I believe, in Taiwan. And there was no means of extraditing him to Taiwan to face charges, and that's how the bill got initially proposed in the legislature. The thing that got really concerning, though, for a lot of people when they saw the bill was they could see its potential to be used outside of just cases for Taiwan, that like it could be used as a bypass for people to be extradited to mainland China and be charged for crimes.
Yeah, a number of people actually brought that up. I think the Bar Association in China, their business leaders, like it wasn't just like one group of people, it was a ton of people. And another fun little tidbit about this, like usually when they bring up things, like bring up bills and stuff like that are major importance, they let people debate it for a while. They let like the public get involved, like these things happen. The last major bill, they let people talk about it for like 3 months. I forget exactly what bill it was, but it was like there was a 3 months like period where they just like could talk about it. With this bill, they gave the public 3 weeks to form an opinion about it. So it was really brief. It was really forced. It was very overreaching. Like, yeah, they gave a reason for it. Like, there's no extradition, but it's now very far-reaching bill that just gives unilateral authority. So there was a lot of people against it. It was a major problem.
Yeah, I think in general, why the process is, I'm not sure I want to say transparent, but why people have like 3 months to react to it is that bills are also normally written, like in the process of writing, they're still public facing, and this one was kind of like written behind closed doors and then tried to push through quickly on top of that.
So then there was protests for it, and they started really ramping up. So through the use of social media, a bunch of these apps, they were really able to coordinate each other. Like in all of 2019, they were able to coordinate really well how they want to go about it. And I can speak about that later. But the first real big rally took place in which they were protesting outside the legislation building. And then June 12th happened, and that was like the big swing point for all of this stuff. So June 12th was when they were debating it, trying to get push it through. They were debating this bill, and there was a ton of, I think there was like 1 million, something like that. John, does that sound about right? Like 1 million protesters?
Yeah, around 1 million. That's when the protests really started to rally a lot of public support.
Yeah.
Keep in mind,
like there was a non-violent part. It was mostly non-violent for the most part, but there was a few hundred people who were quite violent, and they were attacking police officers. They were pushing through. They eventually did get into the legislative building and were throwing things.
Oh yeah, that's where
things.
they straight up fought through the tear gas too, right?
I think that came later, but at first they didn't fight through the tear gas. This time they were actually pushed back by the tear gas.
That's when they stormed Ledgeco. Like that was the day that the bill was going to be passed, and they stormed Ledgeco.
I think that was a different day because they stormed that legislative building like twice.
That's true.
I think the first time was 2014. They did that.
Yeah, so this is a different time. So this is only a few people.
And keep in mind too that 1 million, I think the population there is on the order of 10 million, so that's like 10% of the population protesting here. So imagine if you're in the United States, imagine 33 million people protesting over something Congress does.
So it's massive. It's a big deal. But then the few hundred people who were violent started pushing the police, and the police didn't really respond well. Like at first they responded like pushing them back, but as soon as those few hundred protesters were able to push into the legislative building, the police started really ramping up how they were going to deal with it and were much more militant against it. And this is where they actually messed up. In fact, there's an interesting law in Hong Kong, and I kind of want to quote it actually because it's good enough that it would be good enough to quote.
Do you remember the gist for now, or?
I've got it. I just have.
Okay.
Oh, here it is. Under Hong Kong law, every person gathered at a protest, even if not engaged in violence, not intending violence, commits the offense of a riot if there is a breach of the peace. So I believe if a certain number of people commit acts that are intended to harm or violent or intimidate, like I think it's like 6 or something like that, it is considered a riot. And when like the UK, they're much more strict about it, where they go, okay, only the people committing the violence are the rioters. Everyone else is safe. In Hong Kong, that's not the case. So now everyone was considered a rioter under Hong Kong law, and that allowed the police to just steamroll through. So they used force against those few hundred protesters, but then they started using force against the background people, like all the people that were just like protesting, right to peacefully protest. And so that made things, it ruined the legitimacy of the police. And that's a big turning point.
So that's why, one of the 5 demands was to not classify the mass protest as a riot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Like actually the police violence and like the escalation is one of the. It's actually another one of the demands that was issued through the 5 demands, because like those incidents, and then especially the ones that were tied around the train stations. I believe there was one on like July 21st, but that didn't involve
Yes.
the police. But there was a lot of people that are like that were really concerned about how the police acted on July 21st, because that was when a bunch of like just normal white shirted looking people at a train station started attacking people coming back from protests. And
So to give, oh, sorry about that, John.
oh no, go for it, Raj.
Okay. So to give a little bit more background into what he's talking about, what's happening with the white shirt people, these people chased protesters and non-protesters. These were people just taking the trains into the subway and then started beating them and attacking them. And when people called the police to try and get them to come, they were very slow to respond. In fact, it took, I think, about 39 minutes to respond to calls for anything. So they weren't taking, like, they weren't doing anything about it. And then after the police came, didn't arrest anyone and left, those white shirt people came back again and attacked. And then there was a rumor circulating that it was triads that were doing it. So then a big part of the populace looked at the police and said, look, you guys are corrupt. You're colluding with triads. This is like, you're losing your legitimacy. And then there was one more like really brutal thing where police chased protesters into a mall, and they were like starting essentially like a firefight, not like with actual guns and stuff, but like a fight sort of thing. And like shoppers were getting involved in it because they chased them into a crowded shopping mall. So these 3 protests really lowered any police legitimacy in the eyes of the public. It went from the public viewing them as like safety and like people there to just make sure things aren't doing well, to colluders, to police brutality, to like hated. They hate the police there now just because of these actions.
Yeah, and one important thing to remember is that a lot of this escalation actually like seriously, it seriously concerned the government at the time, because they were concerned that it would escalate even further. So they actually ended up withdrawing the bill at around like I think like September, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And then, but then at this point, a lot of the protests kind of evolved into just a general anti-government protest, which is where the 5 demands come in.
Yeah. It was a lot of the government not responding, and I think you can talk a little bit more about this, John, of just like what the inaction of Carrie Lam,
Carrie Lam,
and what she did.
Oh yeah, like the rhetoric behind the government was like people were bringing up earlier, because everybody was classified as rioters. It was just like there's a really strong attempt by the government to just sign that all the protesters were violent, radical rioters that were just trying to like undermine or like really just try to sabotage the Hong Kong government, and like didn't represent the populace as a whole. And a lot of this would like not change. Like a lot of people in the protesters are calling for even Carrie Lam's resignation, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And
yeah, they
a
are.
lot of the violence never really ceased. Like if I remember correctly, plenty of people were shot. Like at least 1 or 2 people were shot.
3, I think, are confirmed dead. Like a 12-year-old, a 19-year-old, and some other college student was like pushed over the edge of a walkway. To give you a quote on Carrie Lam, after June 12th, when this whole like the first time the police really brutalized people, she quoted in an interview saying, "If young people take action and you don't give them what you want, what then? To use a metaphor, I am a mother. I have 2 sons. If I let him have his way every time my son acts this way, I believe we will have a good relationship in the short term. But if I indulge his wayward behavior, he might regret it after he grows up. He will then ask me, Mum, why didn't you remind me back then?" Essentially saying the populace of Hong Kong is children that needs to be shown their proper place. And that really
I
love help.
I love her characterizing herself as the mother of Hong Kong.
Yeah, I read that, and that shit pissed me off. And I don't even fucking live there.
It just seems like the government, like, Carrie Law or I keep getting her name wrong.
Lamb.
Carrie
Lam.
Lamb really didn't know how to respond and was just like taken aback by how it was all going. And then because they had no response, the police weren't given a direction, and they kind of just did whatever, and it didn't help anything.
Yeah, like because they essentially gave the police as much carte blanche as possible to just crack down on protesters. So you just get so many scenes of them either like just covering people's mouths that they arrested, they can't say their names, or just like firing point blank like rubber bullets or paintball rounds just straight into crowds of people and stuff like that. Because the biggest concern for I think for a lot of protesters is they always are concerned about too much escalation. Because the biggest concern with too much escalation in a Chinese mindset always will remind most people of Tiananmen Square and what happened there.
Well,
Yeah.
I think I don't know. So when talking about a protest, nobody likes the person that wants to have the conversation about holding back and not going too far, because protests are generally pretty accelerationist, and people trying to hold the reins back are generally not looked very fondly of. But I think every protest needs those voices that are like, all right, is pushing it farther going to help us, or is it going to turn the populace against us?
At this
Makes
point,
sense.
actually, in Hong Kong, I think it is helpful, because with how the police responded and acted, it gave clear legitimization to the public, and it delegitimized the police. So now there's an actual basis for what these protesters were arguing about and what they were doing. And now there's a basis for, hey, they just attacked people who weren't fighting, who weren't doing anything. They can attack anyone. They can do this. Like, random people on the train were getting attacked.
Yeah.
Anyone is a target now. So what's the point in holding back? What's the point in that? There's no point in doing that.
And the power of the protest is the populism of it. Like, as soon as you lose favor, even locally, let alone globally, like you're I don't know.
You're done.
Yeah.
So the police have lost favor. So they don't have a.
But then
they have
there's that
legitimacy
point,
politically.
kind of like what you were talking about earlier. But this guy wasn't even protesting, but the guy that murdered his girlfriend and then was going to get extradited, he wasn't.
Yeah.
This is a little bit removed because he wasn't part of the protest, but nobody liked him, right?
Yeah.
And everyone wanted to see him screwed over. So
It was
anything was
just China.
justified to extradite him to and they use that to justify an infringement on civil liberties. And same with
I mean,
the Demonstrato party in Hong Kong. They're like the follow-up to the scholarship movement. They had members. They had many members that were elected to LegCo, and then a couple of the members that got elected mentioned Hong Kong liberation or Hong Kong independence, which is actually straight up against the law.
Yeah, that's 2018. They did that in 2018.
During their oath.
Yep.
And then everyone from that party that got elected got kicked out. And so those two people, and you can say like, yeah, I'm sure that's what you want. And nobody likes the person that's like, yeah, they probably shouldn't have said that and is trying to hold back the reins. But the fact that they said that allowed China to gain enough public opinion and enough like global, like the global community was like, yeah, they need to do something about that. And it gave them the power to be able to just oust all of the members of that party from LegCo.
Did it matter though from an international standpoint? I don't think the international standpoint really had a say. I mean,
I could imagine not like populism internationally, but other countries would view that and be like,
cared enough.
Yeah, but
I think
if they
just
cared,
been like
ambivalent
towards it. Just been it's not enough of a big deal to say anything.
But clearly, it gained them at least enough of a purpose.
It gave them an excuse.
Yeah,
but like
it gave them enough of an excuse that. Yeah, they were waiting for a good enough one that wouldn't cause a bunch more protests and then gain the entire world's attention, you know?
But with how Hong Kong started, as we go back to it, everyone was saying that this was like not a good bill to pass. It was China was overreaching, and there was like people wanted extradition and like how to do it, but the law that was given in was so unilateral that it was just like everyone from the business sector to even people like former party members, former officials, they were going, guys, this is too far. Like there's clear concerns from everyone to lawyers to business to everything. It's a different animal.
Because I feel like one important thing to always bring up with Hong Kong, which we kind of brought up in the history and the idea that they have their autonomy until 2047, is that they are nominally part of China, but they're supposed to be maintaining their autonomy up until 2047. But like, just from what you guys are talking about, and then when you look into how the governments function, it's pretty clear. I feel like we could all agree that there's a lot of influence from Beijing and Hong Kong's government and how it functions.
Oh, clearly, yeah. Like the legislative council being made up of businesses that have vested interest in connecting more with the mainland.
Don't like in Lechco, like more than half of their seats are business interests that are pro Beijing, right?
Yeah, they're like local business, I guess, categories you'd call them, or markets. Like they have
Yeah.
seats for, I think, Fisher, like the I don't know, the fishing community. They have seats for finance. They have two different like types of finance seats, and it's just actual business markets that actually have seats in the government directly. And the people that elect those seats are from that market, like executives from that market, and they're directly influenced by money coming from Beijing.
Funnily enough, there is a voting like an office that you can get voted into in Hong Kong, and I believe that because of these protests, I think like 149 out of 157 or something of those seats were taken up by like pro-democracy, the pro-democracy party. So like the protests really sprang it, but they don't have nominal power. I should preface that they're more of a.
I think that was a little bit high of a number. They did have the majority, and
I remember reading it in a report. I can find the exact number.
Okay,
it'll take a bit.
I could be thinking of a different year because these things change. There's a lot of different elections, but there was that one election that we were already talking about where the pro-democracy people lost their seats, or I think about 20 of them lost their seats.
Yeah, that was 2018.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if they ever got the majority though.
No, that's a different party. It's a different party altogether.
Okay. Yeah, I might be misinformed, but they would have had
the party in like the election in general is more a way to see the consensus on the politics of the people more so than them actually, having legislative power. So take it for what it's worth, but there's quite a few people in Hong Kong who are very much in favor of democracy and against China, and then that can go into how people imagine themselves, because how people look at themselves. Because in Hong Kong now, there's a big thing of we are Hong Kong, we are not Chinese, we are Hong Kong.
Well, and was it last year or this year that they generated their own national, not national anthem, but the city anthem, I guess, the Hong Kong anthem was generated.
I haven't heard about this.
Oh, really? Yeah, there's a Hong Kong anthem. I might actually use it for the intro to this video instead of our intro song.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
that would be fun.
But it's only going to be our second show, so people might think it's our theme song.
I think it's like illegal to sing it now too, because it's considered a sedition.
Actually, that's a good transition because now we can probably start talking about
2020.
COVID in 2020.
Oh, fucking COVID, dude! What a time.
Honestly.
Fuck.
I have to go back to work.
well, COVID's hitting us hard here, but like imagine having a government that wants to repress your speech, having the perfect excuse to tell you to stay indoors and not to go outside and not to protest. Like imagine having, I mean, I guess in some ways we have an oppressive government, but but imagine living in like an overtly repressive government that's telling you need to stay inside, and they have a good ass excuse for it now. Like that's just gotta suck.
I think it'd be very irresponsible to compare the U.S. and Donald Trump to Xi Jinping in China.
Oh, it is
very different level of.
It is.
Pressure.
Yeah.
I was about to make that comparison. I was like, ooh, police brutality.
So-
That sounds like our problems.
While
It's
it
not
is
nearly China's problem.
while it is irresponsible, I'm not sure irresponsible is the right word. It's not
It may not be.
a great.
It's not an apt comparison.
Yeah, even though it's not a perfect comparison, while I was reading Vigil, the book that I read in preparation for this, I couldn't help but make connections to aspects of what's going on in the United States. The
they're
use
definitely
of
there.
tear gas to subdue protests, the spark of violence,
Right,
thugs,
terminology.
thugs being active in the streets. Like there's a kind of a disturbing number of parallels, and they're not like as extreme as they show up in China, but they're definitely there in a worrying way.
Hilariously,
for
Trump
example,
mentioned that he wanted to delay the election.
Yeah.
Look at
Now he's
early.
condemning Carrie Lamb for doing that, for going through with it.
Yep.
Wait,
Look
they're
at
actually
early June.
What was that,
as well.
Matt?
Look at early June as well. Forget Lehman Square in Washington D.C. Close to. I remember I saw this in the news that there was a relatively peaceful protest right there. People had signs up and everything. There was absolutely zero violence at all, and all of a sudden, police started opening fire with tear gas and rubber bullets, and started punching people to get out of there, so that Trump and Barr and whoever else was there so they could clear a path for them to go to some church or something like that.
Yeah.
Remember the upside down Bible?
Yep. Yeah, I don't want to get too
Yeah.
far into U.S. politics because
That
we can talk about that next week. We're
yeah,
talking about.
Oh no, we got Uyghurs.
we do. We're kind of harping on China for the next few weeks here. Spoiler
Oh
alert.
yeah, we have the Uyghurs next,
Yeah,
and the whole controversy with Mulan.
but
point on that one
right.
is our government was clearly violating the First Amendment, their First Amendment rights in that scenario.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth mentioning that there are disturbing parallels, but they're not quite comparable. You're right, Raj, but I think it is worth
They're still there.
mentioning that it's like they're kind of disturbing. When I was reading that book, I was like, oh fuck.
They're still there. They're still not going away. It's
back to 2020 in China. Who knows the most about that? Who wants to? I think
John does. John by far
wants to.
does.
All right.
Oh,
yeah.
I
Hit it up,
I'm
my
volunteering
boy.
You.
Oh,
You
well,
communist support.
yes. I love PJ. What is it? Well, with the turn of the year to 2020, there was like a pretty clear pause. It seemed like in the protest because of a lot of countries, as probably anybody living right now knows, has been cracking down a little bit on public activity to try to reduce the spread of COVID. And then for countries like such as China, Korea, Vietnam, they have pretty stringent laws in some areas to really do their best to undermine COVID. And it was around that time where the Hong Kong government actually instigated that new law, which off the top of my head, I cannot think of the name of it right now but
the National Security something, whatever, National Security Bill, I think. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, it was a proposal to increase the amount of cases where somebody could be put in prison for.
Yeah,
like you got
sedition was
Yep, sedition.
one, foreign collusion, something like that.
terrorism is another one.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me find it. The national security. You keep talking. Keep
A
summarizing.
lot of people were concerned that another law that's far-ranging like this could essentially be like a gateway to just either undermine or really start to diminish Hong Kong autonomy, because a lot of people are concerned that they can use that type of idea of sedition or terrorism to basically justify any imprisonment. And like Trump made a big move during the time of these bills passing that they were planning to eliminate like the special cases between Hong Kong and China, stating that Hong Kong no longer has that sort of special status as an autonomous region to the rest of China, and that they're planning to recognize it as just part of China, saying that it no longer has that autonomy.
Which is a big deal.
All right, so the 4 distinct categories are secession, breaking away from the country; subversion, undermining the power or authority of the central government; terrorism, using violence or intimidation against people; and collusion with foreign or external forces. So those are the 4 categories, and you can tell they're somewhat broad.
Real quickly. So going back to the thing I would say I would find, it was 17 of 18 councillors are now controlled by pro-democracy councillors. And that there are the thing I was referring to are the district councillors. And I think they also got a majority, or they got a heavy boost. So I don't know the exact numbers because I couldn't find it, but
I don't doubt it. But it's the
it's
the industry seats that make up.
Yeah, they don't have power. It's just like how does the populace view it, sort of thing.
Yeah, of the seats that are elected by the people in general, they might have a majority now.
Yeah,
but that's still only half of LegCo.
I don't even think they may influence LegCo really.
Well,
I don't know for
I'm sure they influence it a bit because it's you don't need a majority to block bills in Hong Kong. I think they have enough to block new bills from being passed.
Legally speaking.
But
because
anyway, I just wanted to bring that up.
But they don't have enough to pass new bills that, matter to them. But
yeah, because we have to suppose that Beijing still is essentially the people that control the government, and that if anything, they represent the controlled opposition for
legally speaking, they meet the gridlock threshold. They can block legislation, legally speaking, but whether that actually follows through most of the time, I don't know. I can't speak to that.
It's important to point out that it's on paper they're allowed to, because there's just too many caveats when we think about them being tied to Beijing and the constant fear of the prevailing influence of Beijing. And with this new law that was passed during COVID-19 and going really close to up to date now with the protests slightly ramping up, but because of the increased police activity and COVID, it's a lot easier for the police to justify either arresting or telling them or like cracking down on rallies because they could explain that as a health risk.
Yep.
And with the elections being suspended too, which I can't remember the exact date. If somebody could help me on that one.
I can look it up real quickly. I guess that's my role today.
Mr. Lookup Man. Google Man.
Yes.
But yeah, so basically it would be a serious...
They're delaying it by a year. Scheduled for September 6th, 2021.
A whole year.
A whole year they're delaying it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's a really bad sign that other countries are starting to change their refugee policies for Hong Kong, and other countries are saying to themselves, it might be the time to jump ship, buddy. Because I think it's Britain, Japan, Australia all have changed the number of refugees that are allowed to come in from Hong Kong in a year, and the U.S. is changing its visa requirements for students and workers.
I don't know if they've changed it yet, but they're looking into it.
They're looking into it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
And it's
looking
like,
into changing it.
that's not a good sign when other countries start being like, yeah, it might be time to get the fuck out of there.
Well, the thing is, like, they also were talking about they didn't want it to be another like Tiananmen Square where people like responded. Other countries just responded to it, but they all did it piecemeal. So like the U.S. had its own response, Britain had its response, and it was like it was something, but it faded away and didn't amount to too much. So I think now what the protesters are calling for is, or what people are calling for, is everyone come together, all the international community come together, denounce China together, so you have a united front.
The only thing
And
that
then-
will motivate China to do anything is international pressure at this point.
Yeah, they're not gonna.
Yeah,
But
and
I
even
think
that,
that's the way.
they're not quite the powerhouse that they need to be to take on the world, but like, they have Russia.
They also have COVID. Like nobody wants to do anything right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But they also have Russia support, which they can
do
get
they
away
for
with.
sure?
They can get away with a lot with Russia's
It's-
support.
It's really important to remember that what China represents to the world economy is just such a significant portion of it now that while most people may espouse rhetoric that they support Hong Kong, they benefit a lot more by kind of like cautiously, just enough to appease their populace, support Hong
Mhm.
Kong, and still just full on back Beijing because at this point, it's really easy if these type of laws continue to happen, or if nothing really happens and this law takes full effect, that the de facto like legal position of Hong Kong could just disappear. Honestly, maybe in a year from now.
And I
They're
don't,
even talking about it.
yeah, and it's not just Hong Kong that's the economic powerhouse, which I think I've seen on some forums. As I've been reading about this, people are saying like, "Oh, Hong Kong is like the heart of China's economy," and like it's definitely a large chunk, but it's not like Hong Kong has all of China's impact on the global market. Like China has a lot of its own.
The important thing that Hong Kong had was it had that special reputation of not being associated with China, so it could get through some of the things that were banned that the U.S.
Yeah,
and other countries aren't shipping to
sanctions.
China.
Yep.
Yeah, they could get around those sanctions. That was why Hong Kong was so huge.
Well,
So now that that's gone away,
and President
It
Trump
hurts.
and I don't know. I think current U.S. policy, I don't know if it's gone through yet, but they're working on treating Hong Kong as if it's not a separate region from China now, and will
I think it already
employ
is
the
passed.
same. It's passed, okay,
I believe it's already been passed.
and that would
I'm
mean that
not
they're
mistaken.
treating Hong Kong with the same sanctions and restrictions, economically speaking, as they do with China.
Yep.
Which
Ooh.
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, I guess. I think overall we're probably hurting Hong Kong more than we're hurting China, but it's hard to tell.
A good part of what China wanted to do was get things through Hong Kong. So we are hurting China, but how much is no.
And I gotta imagine
No.
we're really hurting Hong Kong's economy with that. And China, I don't know. It's hard to say. And that's the other thing, is it's hard to say, like, Hong Kong is important to China's economy, but it's hard to tell, relatively, hypothetically speaking, if many Western countries were like, screw you, China, and like split and start punching China, if it would hurt them more, or hurt Hong Kong more, or hurt the rest of the world more.
Well,
like, relatively
the
speaking.
the protests themselves are hurting Hong Kong enough that the sanctions, quite frankly, may not do much to Hong Kong because just how badly some of the protests have done for the Hong Kong economy. And it did, because Hong Kong actually did shut down for a little bit, like ago or a few months ago, it actually did significantly affect the Chinese economy. Like enough that it was like oh, this is something we can notice. That this is a pretty big blip.
Hmm.
But as far as like really impact it, like I don't know economics enough to make that call on how big it was. I just know it was noticeable, like cause for some concern.
So do we feel like we've sufficiently summarized the 2020 protests and what's been going on most recently?
Yeah, the last thing I just want to mention was like Hong Kong, as I was saying earlier, does not view itself as Chinese, and personal identity, is a big part of the nation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if these protests will actually die down, regardless of what happens, just because there's such a big clash of identity, and now there's like xenophobic type things in regards to you're a mainlander, or like stereotypes, heavy stereotyping in regards to you're a mainlander, I'm Hong Kong, you're Hong Kong versus mainlander. So there's just like these huge tensions that are broiling up and just really being expanded upon.
Now,
I
was that
don't know how it's
exacerbated
gonna come together.
by the mass railway, the mass transit railway? Because when
Everything about
I don't know if this is true, but I've heard reports that Beijing was trying to bring more mainlanders into Hong Kong to destabilize their culture, or something along those lines.
I wouldn't
That-
doubt it.
it's a tactic that China has used in regards to Tibet specifically. They've used that quite often. So
Oh,
it's not out of the ballpark.
The general concept, which we can probably cover a lot more when we talk about the Uyghurs, is called sinicization. It's the idea that they incentivize Han Chinese to immigrate or move over to some of the autonomous regions that are more ethnically different from the Han Chinese, which is the majority ethnic group in China, to like kind of foment a Chinese majority in certain regions. And it's not out of the ballpark in any way to imagine that the Chinese would pay or incentivize people through either propaganda or through just genuine
Money.
financial backing to go to Hong Kong to either behave like a protester, to what's the term called where you kind of like help try to like instigate violent events?
agitators.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's examples in already theory crafting the U.S. about the George Floyd protests and like possibly like police being involved in some of the
Oh yeah,
agitation.
the umbrella guy.
Yeah, the umbrella guy comes to mind.
I mean, the U.S. has already done it. I mean, Manifest Destiny is us pushing westward and telling settlers you can take land west.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not a foreign concept by any means.
Yeah, financially backing
Countries
people to power project that doesn't involve like direct federal involvement or government involvement is always a good way to like give you like an extra gap of responsibility from what's actually happening.
It can also be especially like amusing to like shout at the world and like mock the world by saying, hey, we moved all these people here. Hey, Tibet, do you want to vote to be part of China? And all the people that moved there go, yes, we want to now be for China. See, we did it democratically. They democratically voted for us. We did it your way.
I want to jump in real quick because we're talking a lot about economics, which I think is good. But I know a lot of people get squeamish when talking about economics in relation to human rights. And they're like, wow, this is like a human rights issue, and you're just talking about money and who's going to like lose money, who's going to gain. And a lot of people don't like the cynicism of talking about money during human rights issues. But the thing is that a lot of these political issues boil down to where's the money going to go and how are people going to get it. So when we're talking about motivations of other nations and the businesses in Hong Kong and mainland China, everyone is trying to get money out of Hong Kong right now. And their civil liberties depend on like kind of where the money's going to go. And I think that's why why economics has come up in this topic.
I
just want to jump in and like kind of explain that before anyone gets mad at us for reducing it to money, but I feel like
Sadly, that's what we do. Like in every like actuarial mathematics is legitimately that. And what they do is they calculate because there's only so much money. A government, whatever body you want, only has so much money. So, for example, like protective services, where do you put the money? Okay, you could protect and build railway safety stuff, but that will save this many people. So now you have a bunch of money and it saves this many people. Versus if we do highway protection, it saves Y amount of people for this amount of money. So now you've calculated, well, which one do I get more of? Where should I spend the money? I will save more people here per dollar. I'll invest it here. So a lot of it does boil down money, unfortunately. Like there's a whole field about it.
and it's like I don't know if we're I'm not boiling it down to we just want to get our money and we don't care about the civil liberties. It's more like so it's going to boil down to money at the end of the day. The people that actually are able to influence this situation care about money. How can we frame the situation in a way that actually benefits civil liberties while also generating economic benefit for the parties involved? I guess is like I guess that's kind of the way we're thinking about it right now, from what I can tell.
We're taking a very governmental standpoint on it.
Yeah,
Like how a government views it. This is not our views, but this is how people in charge in doing things will view it. Because there's millions and millions of people. I think the Stalin quote is apt. Like you kill up 2 or 3 people, everyone gets up in an uproar because it's personal now. You can see them, you can see the people. You kill 1,000, you kill 1,000,000, they just become numbers, and people can't really conceptualize it. So that's kind of how governments operate.
Yep.
There's millions upon millions of people. To them, it's just numbers. As sad as it is, as horrendous as that sounds, and as awful as I hate that,
and to a
that's
business,
how they view it.
To the businesses, which kind of, at least in America, to a large extent, control the government. The numbers of people just are numbers of money. Like each person's worth a certain amount in their mind. I don't know. That's just how it is, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's a sad reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like
you don't have to like it.
When trying to analyze civil problems, it's helpful to look at economics. I guess that was my point. I went on for a long time, but
yeah.
So
in regards to Hong Kong, there's a big concern now
you cut out for
about
there,
depression.
Raj.
Oh, sorry. With one final thing with Hong Kong that I've looked into too, there's a big concern.
God damn it! You cut out again.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Good. China's trying to censor us.
There's a problem with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression now in Hong Kong because of these protests. And the reasoning behind it we can get into later because that deals into social media. So that can be a different topic, but it's spiked up rapidly, talking like 10% sort of deal, like of the sample size that was sampled, and it was done randomly. So fairly good, fairly accurate, decently as it goes. It's like 10% of the people having depression-like symptoms. And so that's a cause for concern.
All right. What was that, May?
Question. So, what were the Hong Kongers? What was their perception of the British when they were still occupying their city?
I believe it wasn't
not favorable.
It was not good,
from what I understand. It was during the handoff period. They were ready to gain their independence and start becoming their own people and their own culture, and that didn't work out for them well either. The image was kind of trading one oppressor for another. So
it's kind of weird about Hong Kong, right? Because it also ended up being like a sanctuary for people escaping the Civil War, because when the CCP and Mao Zedong won the Civil War in China, places like Hong Kong, Macau, and especially Taiwan basically became places where people who feared the communist winning the Civil War would flee to those places. And yeah, they kind of ended up creating their own community in Hong Kong that was separate from China for a long period of time. Like, it was only until you have to remember that's only until 1997 that they were part of China. From the late 1800s all the way to then, they were part of the British and were their own city, like their own little city-state, essentially.
Yeah. 1997, I think a lot of Hong Kongers, a lot of the people in Hong Kong felt that they were being betrayed and abandoned by the British.
Yeah,
when
because
they
like
left.
while they may out of a national mindset dislike the British, there was still like a very hybrid type of culture and concerns between being in the CCP
Hmm.
Well, and
and
there were actually protests under British law too before the handover as well. So
yeah, it's a very complicated bag of issues.
Yep.
All right.
But
I think that wrapped it up pretty well, right?
yeah, I think we're about out of time. I mean, clearly there's
a lot
so
more.
much more to talk about around this.
Yeah, that ended on a grim note.
We could do like a year of podcasts about the history of Hong Kong and everything.
And the protests.
And the protests. Like, there's just so much to unpack. But
Maybe even come back to it at some point.
yeah, I'm sure as the situation develops, we'll have more to talk about. I'm glad that we did
One
this
thing
research, because
to
now
be
we kind of
proud of.
have, I feel like we've all gained a sort of baseline for this. So as
Wait,
things develop, we can come back and talk to it. But
Wait, what research? What are you talking about? We didn't research anything. This is completely off the cuff.
Oh yeah. We just know all these dates and statutes and whatever that got. And laws
we
that
just
govern
Googled
this.
that.
Yeah, on the
We
spot.
just Googled that real quick. It's fine.
We're like hyper geniuses here, actually.
Maybe something good to bring up would be like, where do we think this ends? What's going to happen in 2047?
Oh God, who knows? It's probably going to end
I
before
know.
that. To be
I
honest,
feel like with the trajectory that things are going in, if China continues their kind of like slow, cautious encroachment, it's just going to be like a very soft coup of Hong Kong autonomy, which we can already kind of see happening.
Yeah. They can't move fast because it's so internationally present, but they're still going to move. So.
I don't think we're going to make it to 2047 before things mostly shake out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure 2047 is the date that things are going to be decided. I think things are going to get decided before that point.
I think it's already decided that they just have to wait for it to come to fruition, essentially.
There's ways that it could change.
The
trajectory can always change, but
Mhm.
at its current trajectory, I think I agree with John. It's gonna...
Yeah. So another grim note to end on.
Yeah, to be honest, yeah, I don't see how there's going to be a happy ending out of this.
I'm just looking at the money, because I feel like that's what it comes down to. It's not in Hong Kong's favor, because Beijing owns the businesses. Clearly they own the markets in Hong Kong. They can influence the politics. They have enough money to throw around that they can highly influence the politics in Hong Kong compared to the native population there. I'm not sure if native population is really the right term, but
considering how they view themselves, might be, honestly.
Yeah. What was that, man?
At least it'll be a happy ending for those constituents.
Yeah, the people that make a lot of money.
Yeah. It's always happy.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna be rolling to go. I mean, like, that's pretty awesome.
So in conclusion today, folks, eat the rich, burn everything down, and that's the message of this entire podcast, I guess, because that's what we came across with last time.
Clearly.
Burn it all down and start over.
Acceleration.
Just think, though. Next time we talk about Uyghurs.
Oh boy.
An even more depressing topic.
Oh yeah, we're going down a rabbit hole. It's gonna be great. And with the burning down all down, I need to be sarcasm alert. So everybody knows. I'm more of a clean your room advocate personally.
I don't I would say that's like hopefully people would know that it's sarcastic about accelerationism, but hearing at the university I'm at and listening to some of the graduate students and stuff talk,
Not too far fetched.
it's absolutely not far fetched.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope you had fun listening to our depressing rants, and I hope you have a great day. And
Hope you
remember,
learned
Stay healthy.
the world's not as bad as you think it is, probably. So, have a wonderful night.
Bye.
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 Bye.